Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Read TFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update into modern audio standards. This particular story is called Billy Bob's Space Trucker, and is part of a series. If you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 29. While the Gladiator fighter bombers represented the vast majority of America's current air or space power in terms of small craft, they weren't all that they possessed. Ever since the concept of close air support came up, the Americans had taken a shine to it. The current evolution of this was found in the AF-72 Wild Boar, an 8-engine close air support platform made with quadruple redundancies throughout all systems. They were bulky and fat, but the armored cockpit in the center carrying as much protection as possible for the pilot. Everyone called them flying pigs, some with affection and some with derision. They were also loaded for battle, possessing dual 2-inch bottom-mounted cannons, 4 side-mounted street sweeper miniguns, 32 launch tubes compatible with the NX-83 air-to-ground Hellfire missiles, NX-84 can-opener anti-armor missiles, or FA-67 forget-me-not multi-purpose missiles. The Flying Pig was fat enough to carry 14,000 2-inch rounds, 128,000 minigun rounds, and 2,000 missiles in any configuration. This was all encased in several inches of titanium alloy, and the newest, biggest shield bubble humans could make. They weren't fast, with the top speed of only 100 miles per hour ground speed. They weren't going anywhere fast compared with normal assault craft or fighter bombers, but they didn't need to. "JJ, wake up. We got the call," came a voice over the pilot's helmet as she woke up. She'd been sleeping in a cockpit since the battle on Bastion was in full swing, and you never knew when the opportunity would arise for their pigs to get called up. She was already spinning up the engines, flicking switches as she checked her systems, getting positive green across the board. She rubbed the sleep from her eyes with one hand as she toggled her comm. "I'm up, Timmy Joe. Got your hog squealing?" she asked. "He's ready to roll around in some shit." JJ smiled at his reply as her hog lifted up off the landing pad only half a second after Timmy Joe. She checked over her loadout, full ammo. They'd given her the usual split, 667 can openers and forget-me-nots, plus 666 Hellfire missiles, which made her smile, as it always did. "What's our MO?" "Rolled in, fuck shit up, same as always," her fellow pig pilot said. She read the map as the display came up in front of her. The cockpit was in the center of the beast, so she relied on various video feeds and map projections to fly and target. A mixed Livertonian and Stormtrooper detachment was holding a fort in the middle of a mountain valley near one of the biggest cities. If they could hold onto it, they could continue to deny the crabs the ability to fill the valley with AA emplacements. A goddamn idea if she ever heard one. They knew this, though, and recently the crabs had stepped up their attacks, flooding the valley with as many soldiers and crawlers as they could. The base was under very heavy assault, and the brass were having trouble getting armor into position, so it was up to the pigs to bridge the gap. They rumbled over the plateau on the edge of the valley, dropping down as they approached the base. It was smoking heavily, and chunks of the wall were broken apart. Her black and white screen giving her clear contrast to see bullets flying out, and the energy bolts heading in. "What song do you want?" Timmy Joe asked, since it was her turn. Good question." She scrolled through her songs on her implant before smiling. "Roll sleigh bells. What? It's my turn, I get to pick, and I'm going to queue up Pepper Up Airplanes next. Golden oldies, huh?" "You can pick when it's your turn." She quickly flicked a few switches that hadn't been stuck on her pig. The first thing every true pig pilot did after getting a new one was to bolt the biggest, loudest speakers they could onto the exterior and slave them to their implant's music. The crabs assaulting the base gave pause, looking to the sky as the sleigh bells started, alerting them to the presence of the flying pigs. The second hint they were about to have their night ruined was when both pilots pulled the triggers and the dark was filled with flashes as their cannons started belching out the mini meteors. JJ cycled her missile tubes, so as the song sang out 16666 like the Pentagon, she fired all 32 loaded Hellfire missiles. Her eyes gleamed as if they were burning, instead of all the crabs she just set on fire. The first of their AA response started after that, matter slammers hitting the shields as she watched the energy level decrease. The flying pigs hovered over the battlefield, advancing slowly as they each began to cycle through missiles, peppering the crabs below them with hellfire while making sure to hit the crawlers with the can openers. Their street sweepers spun up as well as they began to simply fire upon all hostile targets. Brass simply rained down upon the bodies of the dead crusticans as the flying pigs hovered over the battlefield. The crabs had stopped advancing on the damaged base. Instead, they were falling back across the craters and broken ground to try and escape the flying death machines. More matter slammers hit the shields until the energy bubbles were gone. The outside of the flying pigs started taking direct hits now, as inside the pilots kept their guns firing while diverting systems and monitoring their engines. "Engine 2 gone," JJ said as she shut it down. "Left forward street sweeper out." Neither pilot was backing down as they slowly rumbled over the battlefield, while roll blared out loud enough to still be heard over the intense sounds of cannons and miniguns firing. Inside the base, the Livertonians and humans were dragging wounded to safety and putting out fires, some trying to get defensive emplacements operational once more. This wasn't the end to the battle, not by a long shot, but this was a small smoke break for the soldiers, and they'd take every chance they had to reload and prepare, all while the music rang out over the sound of death being unleashed on the crabs. 6 missile tubes busted, engine 3 out, JJ said as she kept monitoring her systems, watching them flash yellow one by one. Pig pilots went through subsystems like most soldiers went through bullets, and they went through bullets like, well, something even faster, very, very fast. 1 and 2 are busted, left cannon jammed, clearing. Something big stood up near the hills the crabs were scurrying towards. A crawler they hadn't seen before. Big fecker. Bigger than their matriarchs even by a good margin. Had to be some sort of assault bot. It fired off 2 launch bolts which slammed into Timmy Joe's ship. "Heck, that's done it for me." "Down to 7 and 8. Cannon's gone. 1 street sweeper. I'm out, JJ. Pull back." "I'll see you at back at the base," JJ said, focusing her cannon fire on the big bot. It fired off 2 more of those massive bolts in her direction as she tried to juke it to the left. It still hit the right side of her pig as she shook in the cockpit. The right cannon, street sweepers, and engines were all down. Mud paper airplanes started playing as she grinned. Working quickly, she cycled the last of her hellfires plus 2 can openers as she flew over the massive crab bot. Then she hit the emergency release, dropping 2 massive cases of missiles down at its feet. Another matter slammer hit engine 5, leaving her with just 1 and 7. The pig was leaning heavily to her side, pouring smoke as she turned to book it out of there. As the flying pig sailed over the head, she triggered the last of her missile tubes, firing out the can openers first, and the hellfires just after. They arced out towards the cases of the now armed missiles she dropped on the field, turning night into day behind her. She saw a flash on her comm. "Jesus Christ, you're a gorgeous flying pig. Thank you. When this is over, I'll buy you a drink." "Yeah, you and a million others. Don't worry, Stormy. We'll be back as soon as they patch my hog up." She cut the feed, tilting her pig to keep it moving with only 2 engines, pouring smoke and sparks as she limped back to the pig pen, which was what they called their forward base. As it settled down on the pad, with some screeching and scraping, the flight crews already had machines in place to start replacing the engines and getting her ride operational once more. The pilot finally disconnected, crawling out through the small hatch to get out of her ship. "All right, fellas, I need to go take a crap. When I get back, I want this pig squealing for me, and someone get me my stencil and spray paint. I ain't flying a pig with no porker painted on the front." The pilot had cuts on the right side of her face that were bleeding. She seemed to be limping because of a chunk of metal stuck through her thigh, and there was a good chance she'd broken her pinky on her right hand with the way it was bent. But the first thing she did was pull out a smoke and an old zipper to light up as she walked towards the nearest crapper. She held up the zipper as she walked, watching the flame flicker in the night, eyes gleaming with the reflection of the fire. "Feck, who is that?" one of the new flight crew asked. "What, her? Oh, you'll get to know JJ. She's Jackie Jill, little sister of Billy Bob, space trucker." The CIA senior agent had given up waiting on Billy Bob and instead explained the situation to Emily, who in turn would explain things to Billy Bob once all the space hamsters were too tired of being tossed in the air or exhausted from laughing as he blew fat raspberries on their bellies. It took about an hour until they were all tuckered out, retreating to the crew quarters on the Rosie to pile up and sleep in a giant pile of chubby space hamsters. Emily and Billy Bob were in his Longhorn as his pet Mittens, making up for not being around much by scratching the animal's cheeks and letting it sleep on his lap. He wasn't sure how it was different from sleeping on the bed, which is what the lazy cat almost always seemed to do. But somehow Mittens felt it was different. "So what's the deal?" he finally asked Emily as Mittens let out a content purrs. "I'm rather surprised, honestly. The space hamsters got in contact with your CIA somehow and let them know that they had a few select members in power who wanted to assist the war effort. It turns out the arsefaces have been lying this whole time." Billy Bob stared at her, then a sort of blank expression taking over his face. She was moving her hands and talking about something, and he heard words like council and foundation and secret and treaty being tossed around. He got the general idea. The arsefaces were arseholes and had eaten some guys the space hamsters liked, but lied about it. He wasn't sure about all the other stuff that she was going into, but he was vacantly staring at her chest. She had that little tuft of feathers right where there would be cleavage if she had breasts. Her chest had an appropriate shape. Idly he scratched Mittens' chin as the cat purred, slowly sliding off his lap so that he could keep putting the cat back into place. Did he ask her what was under the vest? I mean, they were supposed to be mates now, right? Wait. Did that mean that they were married, just like, together? Crap. Did he need to buy her some jewelry? Did Libertonians like jewelry? She liked colors and stuff. Maybe if he got her like a prism? She kept talking, and he would nod and make little sounds of acknowledgement now and then. More about the arsefaces being arseholes, and how this could totally change their luck in the war. But so far, they had good luck, so, how should he approach it? Try to be all casual, or wait for her to get all affectionate and rub cheeks? What was his plan of attack here? She was already acting possessive around other women. Did he even want to go that route? That CIA guy hadn't actually mentioned sex when talking about Libertonian unions. Well, he mentioned reproduction, but that was apparently optional. Not like they could breed. Could they? He was on a space station with a space eagle raptor and a bunch of space hamsters, and he could adjust the gravity at will and travel faster than light. But messing around with biology seemed awfully finicky. Like those flesh-eating planets they made by mistake 100 years back, while trying to genetically engineer a new plant to survive the pests on that new colony. The only good thing that came from that was a bunch of hippies got eaten. Speaking of, whatever happened to those smelly space hippies and those living rock creatures? Stoners? Oh, how had he not thought of that sooner? Wait, where had he been going with this? Emily was staring at him. So Mr. Monopoly Hamster is an important counselor, and he hates ass crabs, and he's going to help us mess with the big government meeting that I've been trying to get you to this whole time. When was this again? At the end of the Space Week. Jesus Christ, is it? I thought we had more time. He blinked a little at the realization he'd been traveling with her for almost a month now. In fact, he was fast approaching Halloween. Maybe he'd show her how to go trick-or-treating. Wait, where was he going to find her a costume? And also, where was he going to find the place to go trick-or-treating? Crap, maybe if they finished up this galaxy-ending thing soon, he wouldn't miss it. Oh, but America was at war, and UHG Halloween just wasn't the same. Oh, but Canada, they weren't bad. After we expose the founders for the suppression device and the space hamsters throw their support to us, it'll really undermine their authority. I'm not sure how much influence they have over the other species, but there's a chance we'll only have to fight the fleckos, arsefaces, fish cops, and space poodles. Isn't that what's going on now? Well, that's because the other species have to build up and move into position. Those three were simply the only ones ready for war. That reminds me, I haven't heard much about the fleckos in the war. Well, they mostly engage in what most species would consider a brutal melee combat style, so, humans probably crushed them without much effort. Oh, that'll teach those dancing posers who get served an F in the A. Still, I don't know what that means. Don't worry about it. She smiled at him and then leaned forward a little. You know, we're all alone now. He froze as she said that. He hadn't decided how to approach this yet. She was taking the lead. What did he do? Play it cool, Billy Bob. Well, aside from Mistons, he lifted the cat up, who let out a snort as he was disturbed from his resting place. So Billy Bob quickly sat up back in his lap, rubbing a hand alongside the cat's belly, as it opened its arms and legs up. Then he gasped as the cat had wrapped around those big paws around his hand and started to bite and kick his palm. "Ow! Knock it off, you furball!" He tossed Mittens off his lap. The cat landed on his feet and stared back at Billy Bob before sitting down and starting to aggressively clean himself in a way only cats seem to be able to do. "Well now, we don't need to worry about him," Emily purred out. This is very true. It just is two of us now." Did he rake out the present? No, he still wanted to save that. Music? Should he get a slow jam going? Had he exposed her to those yet? Then he watched her lean forward before pausing, shivering, as her feathers seemed to get all ruffled out before smoothing over as she opened her mouth in what he realized was a yawn. "But it's been almost 5 hours since I slept. I am really tired." "Yeah, and you've been so busy. Why don't you sleep? I'll take the Stomper out and play with him some while everyone's asleep, so I don't bother them with the high gravity." "That's a good idea." She stood up, and he figured she'd wander on by. But instead, she reached over to brush her hand through his hair. He had to admit he froze for a second before feeling that she was wearing her glove. Then she slid into his lap, which she also didn't expect. She was so tall, but so light. He could easily support her on his lap, but with how tall she was, it wasn't like cradling a normal woman on his lap. She still looked down at him easily. I'm really glad you chose me." "Hey, we survived all kinds of chaos so far. I'm sure a little more won't hurt." "Are you implying our relationship is going to be chaotic?" "Seeing as you nearly killed me twice, yes, I do." "Oh, hush. Once this is over, I'm sure there'll be peace, and then we can have some nice quiet time together. Enjoy state dinners and ceremonies." Whoa. What part of our time together has made you think I want to be part of any sort of official dinners? Oh, come on, you're the diplomat. You go. Just bring me back a doggy bag. She frowned before he went on. "That means bring me the leftovers from dinner." Oh, well, you'll have to get used to it, at least a few. You're going to be a big hero, you know. Shit. This is why I wanted to become a space trucker after my service was done. No one expects anything formal from a space trucker. She laughed and got up from his lap before curling up on the bunk. Once she was lying down, he got up, walked into the cargo bay to get Stomper. The six-legged, four-eared space fox was excited to see him like always. Billy Bob smiled and grabbed the giant bone, opening the back of the hatch to let them both out before he turned the gravity up inside just the Atlas's cargo bay. The giant space fox, was that it? Was that the name he chose? Giant Space Fox. Why the hell didn't he think of that sooner? He was going to save UHG diplomats so much time trying to explain what species looked like with his simple naming system. Either way, the giant space fox had been growing slowly, but steadily, since he'd liberated him from those stupid space hippies. It still stomped happily when he would grab it by the big fluffy tail and wag it around. But he wondered how long it would be until he'd have to be careful before the creature knocked him down when it jumped on him happily for the toy. He tossed the toy around and played with Stomper for an hour to make sure both he and the animal got some good high-gravity exercise in, before finally herding him back up into the Longhorn, leaving him with more water and food. Once that was done, though, he quickly looked around and started jogging. He didn't know how long the space hamsters would be out, and he needed to start gathering some intel. He climbed the small steps of the Xeno ship, 2 at a time, to get to the bridge. Sliding his seat, he started to type in the console so he could bring up a few screens on the extranet. He needed to be very careful with his searches, and then make sure to clear the history just in case. When he was younger, a few wayward searches had made him think that there was a whole species of only female blue-skinned Xenos that was super hot. Why couldn't there be Xenos like that? The reality of evolution sucked balls sometimes. Of course, he had found dubstep frogs and a pug-faced ogre, so, it still sucked balls sometimes. Who was he kidding? He was just starting to type out what he figured would be the best string to get some actually helpful insight into the Libertonian bodies, when he heard a soft voice. "Mr. Billy Bob?" Billy Bob jerked and turned, covering the screens with his body, even though he hadn't hit enter yet. He saw a space hamster that was rubbing its eyes blearily. Yes?" I had a nightmare. Can you toss me in the air a bit?" He looked around the empty bridge and then back at the space hamster wearing the business suit. "Sure." He stepped towards the creature, scooping him up and then surprising him with a raspberry as the space hamster squealed and laughed. Billy Bob went walking down with him to the cargo bay, which he'd reset the gravity in. Once he was done tossing the space hamster in the air and put him back to bed, that was when he'd do his research on Libertonians. How the hell had his life gotten this complicated? And so ends another chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob Space Trucker. I would like to thank our T5 members and patrons, Casper Arnholtz, Jon Creighton, Vidmori, 050, Dragzoon W.R.E, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.